Good morning, everyone. We're sorting out some technical difficulties this morning, and we think we've adapted. Lorettos are very adaptable. This morning on our Immigration Spotlight, we have Dr. Kristin Wittee, who in my world is, more like a daughter than a doctor. Met her about 20 years ago, I think-ish, through my oldest son and youth ministry. I had a chance to do what was it called? Encounter in Washington, D.C. With a whole bunch of high school students. That might be kind of when we really got to know each other. Kristin now is, I'm going to let Kristin introduce herself. She's got a very long, interesting, rich past, and she can share what she likes and who she's working with now. Kristin, take over. Oh, wait. First, I have right now, Kristin's with the Lutheran Immigration. What's the R stand for?
Refugee. Refugee Service.
Thank you. And I picked a prayer off your website for this to start with this morning. God of rebirth, we pray for immigrant adults and children who have been forced to leave behind all they have ever known. Heal them from the trauma of fear, deprivation, loss, and abuse. Comfort them and give them peace and wholeness. Prepare us to be welcoming friends who relieve their uncertainty. Let it be so. Okay, Kristin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for being my other mother. Rox could actually ask me to do just about anything and I would show up and do it. So I'm just thrilled to be here. Real quick introduction, Kristin Wittee. I have done youth ministry, college campus ministry at Loyola University, Maryland, Catholic Relief Services as the head of youth and education. And now I'm with Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. While I was at Catholic Relief Services, so a lot of church, a whole lot of church. While I was at Catholic Relief Services, I had the honor and privilege to work on the Vatican's Share the Journey campaign, which you may have heard of, which was really a global migration awareness raising and education program. And having the opportunity to do that, I fell in love with accompaniment. And what does it mean to accompany people on the journey? But as I fell in love with that concept, I also realized that the injustice that surrounds that accompaniment has to also be addressed. You know, I'm a full-blown Jesuit educated girl, so we cannot have faith without works. We cannot have work with the symptoms without trying to cure the injustice disease. So I am incredibly passionate about the work that is being done at LIRS. I kept saying, I'm not going to go work for the Lutherans. I'm not going to go work for the Lutherans. I'm not, and then I did. Because the work is the work of Christ. And I'm very proud of what I do. My background educationally, undergrad in theology from Loyola, 3 masters, theology, pastoral counseling, and education, and then a doctorate in ministry and pastoral counseling. So I have been going to grad school for 25 years. I'm not done yet. I feel like there should be a 12-step program for graduate school so that I can stop going to graduate school, but people keep offering to pay for it. And why walk away? I love learning. I see the opportunity to learn, and that's one of the reasons I love now working for the ELCA branch, but also Pan Lutheran, because I learn every day. Every day something happens. This last week, I had to write a faith and climate displacement document. I have no background in climate displacement. So I had to become an expert in climate displacement in a week. And so it was reading and learning and studying and cracking open scripture and figuring out where the injustice lies and how we can start to resolve that and what God is calling us to. And so it's my happy place. I'm gonna share with you a real quick resource. Rox, you touched my heart because I actually had the opportunity to write that prayer. As the, I know, thank you. As the direct, I got her approval. As the director for outreach at LIRS, it is my responsibility to mobilize the approximately, give or take, 13,000 congregations. There are about 5 million, 6 million practicing Lutherans in the United States, but more importantly, other people. One of the reasons they hired the Roman Catholic to be the director for outreach, which is where faith intersects with the mission. It's where we answer the question, what can we do to help? And it's where we answer the question, why does this stem from the gospel in our organization? Part of the reason I took this job is because I have, as Rox mentioned, I have a 7-year-old as of Sunday. She was 7. And I was holding my, at the time, 4-year-old baby and rocking her just because I could, because I'm a mama. And I was watching on the news that kids were in cages. And I was writing religion textbooks for Loyola Press at the time, so that I could be at home taking care of my daughter and taking care of my mother, who needed some surgery. And I sat up and I looked at these kids in these metallic blankets and I said, I can't justify it. And I looked at her little blonde head and I thought, I am not going to be able to look back in history at this moment when these kids are being treated in this way and hold my baby and look at her when she's a teenager or in her 20s, and she'll say, Mama, what did you do at that time? And I'll say, I wrote textbook series in my yoga pants. No, I have to put my chips in. I have to go fight. This is who I am. And this is why I do what I do. So I looked around and immediately, you know, God has a sense of humor. Immediately the job opened and immediately I was hired and I was like, oh, I thought that would take longer. And then the pandemic hit. So I have been working in my yoga pants for the last 1.5 years, but I have been doing what I believe to be sacred work. Real quick, so that I want to real quick show you something else. I want to test to see if my share screen works. So we'll see if this works. So hold please while I make sure that the technology does not fail me. You should be able to see a video screen. Is that correct? Okay. We are, LIRS is Lutheran-based, Christian-based, faith-based organization that's been around for 80 years. Originally founded by a very strong woman, Cordelia Cox, brought it to its, what I would describe its prominence in the United States. Lutherans started resettling people during World War II when people were fleeing the Nazi regime. There really wasn't a process in the United States. So the Lutheran communities in the US decided, well, you know, we'll bring over our townspeople and our friends and our families and we'll figure out how to make this work. And they started creating patterns like people need jobs. So we've got to have a job system. People need to learn the language. So we're going to create a language system and an apprentice system and teach people how the financial systems work here. And so they became niche experts on resettlement. But then that grew, and especially in the 1960s with the Cuban airlifts, and then in the 70s with the Vietnamese and then Hmong communities, the mission kept evolving as the definition of who is my brother and sister became larger and larger. Nowadays, LIRS has two primary pillars. One is refugee resettlement, which, as all of you know, is its own animal. Refugee resettlement has very specific role. You may be aware that we were throttled in the last 4 years. Refugee resettlement went down. The official presidential determination was 15,000, but there's no way we're going to be able to reach that because of the Remain in Mexico policy, because of COVID, and more importantly, because the refugee resettlement system in the United States was dismantled. It was systematically attacked. So amidst that, the second pillar of LIRS is child and family services. And when I spoke to Rox about it, she had asked me, because we were talking about some of the things that LIRS is about to innovate and try, and we've never tried before, but why not? We need to serve, and kind of what's been going on, what we're doing, and then kind of what we see as unique innovations in the future that we might be able to provide. So what I'm going to do, even though I'm talking to the experts, and I love talking to the experts because it means that a lot of the things that I would normally say, like, so we have a southern border, and on that southern border, and I don't have to do that, but what I am going to do is I am going to offer to you all the opportunity to watch what we've created, and I will be sending Rox the links to the videos so you can repurpose them anytime you want to. But I want to offer just kind of the short, sweet, and to the point version of our child and family services on the border programming. It is a unique time. None of you are in need of me explaining it in detail, but with the surges that came in 2017, 2019, again, 2021, but also the Remain in Mexico policy, the pandemic, an influx of families that we've never seen before. Traditionally, it wasn't families who were traveling, and now it is, with the family separation policy that was so tragic, but it got my little booty off the sofa. I think it's not bad to have a 101 that you can share with other people. So I'm going to now share that with you.
And I'm President and CEO of Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, or LIRS. You've likely seen the headlines surrounding the influx of unaccompanied children at our southern border, and I know many of you are wondering what you can do and how you can help. First, I'd like to help put the alarming numbers and headlines we've been seeing in context. Since April 2020, we have observed steady increases of people arriving at our southern border, many seeking protection and safety. Some are unaccompanied children, meaning they are not traveling with a parent or guardian. In the past few weeks, they've been arriving in high numbers from the Northern Triangle, which includes El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. Unfortunately, however, several factors have coalesced in 2020 and early 2021 to create an emergency situation requiring children to seek safety outside of their home country. They are, in many cases, fleeing for their lives. Today, things are complicated even further by the pandemic. According to U.S. law, unaccompanied children are supposed to be processed by CBP and then transferred quickly to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, ORR, an agency with child welfare expertise whose network of providers, including LIRS, care for these kids until they can be safely reunited with their sponsor. But ORR's capacity, just like so many other places, has been significantly reduced in the last year. To try to address this immediate problem, the federal government has opened temporary influx facilities to move children out of CBP detention. These facilities are not a real solution. But of course, no child should be in CBP detention facilities that are so clearly not meant for kids. These children are not just in our custody, but in our care, and any location should be subject to child welfare best practices, come with an expiration date, and exclude operation by private for-profit entities. But there is good news. While the children have come to the border alone, about 85% of them have a parent or relative who's already in the US. That's where LIRS comes in. We are working quickly to reunite children with their families and give them a safe, stable home. And we're advocating on the national level to ensure children are protected and cared for. We invite you to support however you can through donations, prayers, advocacy, or even applying to become a foster parent. We ask too that you collaborate with us to promote compassion, empathy, and education. Children at the border, like all children, deserve love and safety. Please join us in this work of welcome.
You just had the opportunity to meet my boss virtually. That was Krish Omera Vignaraja. She is the executive director of LIRS. She is also the only woman who is in charge of a refugee resettlement agency in the United States. And she is formerly of Sri Lanka. Her family fled Sri Lanka in order to come here to the US with nothing. So, and then she became Michelle Obama's policy advisor, and now she is our CEO. So when I tell you that we as an organization have been on the front line of so much of this, there are specific pillars that we provide. So I'll kind of lay those out. What are we doing? What is kind of the protocol for what we're doing? I'm going to lay out a little bit of kind of what the challenge has been and give an example of the challenge. And then I would really, I'll tell you a couple of what I believe to be innovations, things that you're going to start to see happen in the US and a number of sites that I think are going to transform things, and that, you know, anyone is more than welcome to volunteer or ask for more information or serve within. We are always looking for advocates. Child and Family Services is in the hot button seat right now. There's a lot of conversation, but not enough action. So to really lay out a couple of the things that LIRS does that Krish kind of broadly alluded to, we have what's called safe release support. So if 85% of the children that are coming across the border, which that is an accurate number and people do not know this information, actually have a family member or relative in the country, we are dedicated to making sure they start with background checks of potential guardians. So we have to make sure that they're going to a safe place. This is to prevent trafficking and a number of other things. But from there, we work with the guardians to identify their needs. What if they don't have basic children's clothing? What if they don't have parkas for the fact that this child is coming to Minneapolis and has only ever lived in a warm climate? Do they have the right shoes? Will they have books and book bags for school? Recently, we have seen a rise in the need for prosthetics, prosthetic legs for children, hearing aids for children. And so LIRS helps them with their needs, not just for the 60 to 90 days and then hands up because the government isn't giving us money. That's what being a faith-based organization and takes us to the next level. This is a moral journey. This is an accompaniment journey. So we then accompany the children, not just to identify the immediate needs and necessary services. We also do pro bono legal counsel, English language classes, job training, and healthcare. Now, does LIRS do this? Like, will I be asked tomorrow, because we're short on people doing English as a second language class, to teach it? Answer, no. We work through Lutheran social service affiliates throughout the United States. So we fund the refugee resettlement and child and family services programming for migrant children in the Lutheran social service sites throughout the United States. The reason that's important is I have on multiple occasions had people raise their hands and say, well, I support the Lutheran Social Service Agency, or I support Casa de Paz, which is an organization that we have in the past supported. And I get to say, well, thank you. What do you mean? Well, thank you for supporting them, but that they are us. We are them. We are one thing. Oh, we are just the place where the federal government and large foundations and donations will give to the reputable 80-year-old organization so we can disperse it to where it's most needed, so that we make sure that it's going to where the need is greatest, and so that we have a little bit of resource for innovation, which I'm excited about. The next piece, we do provide transitional foster care. And that nurtures particularly vulnerable children who will be united with their families, particularly very, very young children. All of the children in the program, the temporary foster care program, including minors under 12, pregnant or parenting youth, young people with disabilities, and sibling groups are considered vulnerable. They receive one-on-one assessments, counseling, holistic support, ranging from education to legal services and healthcare, and they receive access to religious services. I'm gonna pivot for a second. So as part of what we've been doing at LIRS, the two, San Diego and Dallas, the two conference centers that were used as temporary holding centers for children who would come in, we made sure that there were clergy and volunteers that were trained to work with children and had been fingerprinted that were present, not just the border patrol people who were not. One of the things that we found when asking the children themselves, what do you want? What do you need? Like making sure they're fed, making sure they were getting showers, making sure they were being taken care of. But what do you need? What do you want? The number one thing that they answered, and this broke my heart, was they wanted people to come pray with them. They asked for Padre, and they kept asking for Padre, because they knew if they could get people of faith in there, they would help. If they could get access to someone of faith, they could help. They would get them to their home. They would get them to their family member. But that these people with the guns, these people who are walking around that look scary in uniforms, Padre, prayer, Padre. One of my colleagues, and we don't ever do anything but hopeful videos. So we don't show what we see. We tell about what we're trying to do to change it, and we tell the truth, but it's exploitative to show the kind of things that we often see. And it's just lacking human dignity to profit on other people's suffering. So we don't show our young people who we're supporting. But I did have the honor to see some of the pictures from the team that went down, and to see those little faces, and to think that what they're asking for is a person of faith that will keep them safe. I came home and I turned to my husband and I said, we're going to have to take in 75 kids. We're just going to have to figure it out. Like, I don't know how we're going to do it in a tiny little house, but we're going to take in as many people as possible. And he's like, honey, yeah, this might not be the right time for us to do that. And I'm like, nope, we're taking in everybody. And he said, okay, you need to slow down. So that is transitional foster care. Transitional foster care says when a child moves to Office of Refugee Resettlement from Customs and Border Patrol, we, particularly the vulnerable, make sure that they have homes that can help them in a very specific way. Then there's long-term foster care. When they have no identified caregiver, this is a completely different animal. This isn't we're going to match them back with their family or to match them with their relative. This is they're coming, but they're eligible for legal immigration protections. So long-term foster care, the children stay in the program until their immigration case is resolved. They are not in a detention cell or a detention facility. They are in a home with a family with case management. That is a huge difference. And that's why we've been doing pushes across the country for foster care. Can we get up the number of foster families that we have in the pipeline? Because it's not easy to foster a child. It's a full-time job to foster a child. But it's a calling. And so long-term foster care is something, they are typically legally transitioned into the unaccompanied refugee minors program, an unaccompanied, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But this is while their case is pending. We don't want them to be in the adult system. We want them to be in a home. We want them tucked in at night. So the next piece is unaccompanied refugee minors. And LIRS, in the name of protection and making sure that people are empowered, we place unaccompanied refugee minors, which is something that almost no other country in the world does, unaccompanied refugee minor programming. From all over the world, we place them into foster care, group homes, and semi-independent living settings. So this is a house that has a number of 15 and 16-year-old boys and girls, boys in one house, girls in another, that has someone monitoring them, that has someone making sure that they get dressed, they get ready for school, they get their lunchbox, that is helping them to learn the skills of self-sufficiency. And then we do home study and post-release, because it's not acceptable to send a child out into the world that's gone through so much and then not follow up, not make sure that the family is treating the child with dignity and compassion, not like make sure that the family is not abusing that child, make sure that the child is being loved and cared for. So we make sure, particularly with the vulnerable unaccompanied children that I mentioned earlier, we make sure that there's community-based case management. So there's home study and post-release services that are connecting them to community resources and connecting them, empowering families with resources and knowledge, so that when they're making decisions about school, legal representation, healthcare, religious services, that somebody's there to actually walk through the process with them. They've just had a child land into their lives. And as someone who adopted a child, I can tell you, the process to go through and be fingerprinted and have people examining your home and make sure that there's a thermometer in your refrigerator is unbelievably difficult. Then the child shows up and you have to figure out how to manage this new human in your system. We think that's the last time you should walk away. That's the time you should step in. So we keep our promise to thousands of unaccompanied children each year. And we provide them with safety and family support instead of institutional support. Children in long-term foster care, that's about 10 to 17 usually, when they enter, because they're really very vulnerable before that, when they enter the program, on average stay for 271 days. That's 271 days where they will be checked in on, where they will be cared for, where they will get proper nutrition, where they will get proper exercise, where they will be read stories, where they will have the opportunity to take classes and someone's monitoring. And, LIRS and Catholic Charities were actually during the 2018 family separation crisis, and this is one of the reasons I chose LIRS, during the family separation crisis, which I don't think anybody believes wasn't one of the most traumatic, darkest times in our country's history. LIRS was one of 2 agencies. It was just the 2 of us that were working to reunite migrant children with their families. So the weight of getting the children back to the people that they should be with, that they are called to be with, even though the people may have been deported, even though the child might be currently going through their hearing, but the parent went through their hearing or didn't have a hearing, or we have to figure out how to get that child to their family. And so we have been investing. And sometimes the government doesn't pay us, more often than not. The government doesn't pay us to do these kind of things on the level that we do. So that's where we do things like fundraising and activities, and we go find major donors and foundations, because that's where we can have the flexibility to be more than what the government views we should be. We were decimated, absolutely decimated. We had to lay off massive amounts of staff all over the country because refugees weren't coming in and migrant children were being held at the border. And so when we look at what's happening now, we're not just looking at the problems that have created the influx, because the root causes, which you guys are experts on, but the root causes that lead to the influx, sadly, we also have to, as LIRS, look at the fact that there is no infrastructure right now. We had to lay off the infrastructure, people who know how to do this well, people who were able to fix, people who had experience with training families on foster care. We have to go rehire them. There isn't a pathway that we just need to reopen. The pathway got decimated. So now we're building the infrastructure, hiring the people at the same time as the flux is coming in. So really it's a perfect storm, unless we're willing to go above and beyond what the government says and the money that they give us. So we've been working hard, but I'll give you an example. I don't know how familiar you are with the database collection situation. I didn't know this. I only know this because of LIRS and where I work. So Customs and Border Patrol, which is a nice way of saying the law, the ICE, the people who are on the border with the guns and the uniforms that often cause problems. Customs and Border Patrol is now housing children because Office of Refugee Resettlement was decimated, had no staff. Now Office of Refugee Resettlement is staffing up. Customs and Border Patrol still, for some, we don't know why reason, are still holding kids instead of moving them to refugee resettlement so we can put them in homes. They are 2 distinct offices. Under the Trump administration, very quietly, the decision was made to join the databases between Office of Refugee Resettlement and Customs and Border Patrol. What does that mean? Well, it's a disaster. What that means is that when a family would come to claim their child, Border Patrol would be waiting for them and would then send them, either detain them or send them back and deport them. Wait a minute. So we've got all these kids and the parents are coming to get their child. A basic instinct. What we want to have happen is families to be reunified, and they'd get hauled off because they were talking to each other. They have 2 separate missions. So one of the first things the Biden administration did was disconnect the systems. So they do not talk to each other anymore. But imagine if you're a family who knows that another family got picked up when they went to go get their child as if the child was bait. Would you go to pick up your child? That's your child. They're saying, come get your child, but you know that the last family who did it got picked up because the databases are connected. Do you trust the government? I don't know what I would do. Do you take that risk? Going and potentially losing your freedom and losing your rights and not knowing what's going to happen to your child and not even knowing if they really have your child? That is cruelty. That is everything we stand against as Christians. So one of the things that LIRS figured out is that we need to start by rebuilding the trust. And we have the blessing of being faith-based. So we have been doing 70%, between 70 and 75%, depending on the month, of all of the fingerprinting of the parents who would be receiving the kids on the ORR side. So if that's the case, how do we get these parents to believe that we're not trying to deceive them? And the answer that we came to was, we're going to be building, these are the innovation things that I wanted to talk to you about. We're going to be building kiosks at churches and faith institutions all over the country. You know, like the Department of Motor Vehicles has kiosks, or we used to put photos at photo kiosks. A walk-up fingerprinting ATM system where you can go up and you can be fingerprinted on church property in a setting where you would seek asylum, where you feel safe. And there would be no Customs and Border Patrol, but instead we're going to be finding volunteers to man, and there'll be staff to man the kiosk so that people feel safer. They feel safer in that environment to come. And then once they're fingerprinted, once they have their background check, then we can match them with their child, and they'll start to feel that they can again trust the system is not going to betray them. But think about it. I mean, think about being one of those parents. You know your child is in the country. You know your child is trying to get to you. You can't communicate with the system, and then you start finding out that the system is actually a trap. Your child is being used as bait. We have to rebuild from scratch. All of us, anybody working in the migration field, must make trust the primary goal right now. And they may or may not ever trust the government after the pendulum swings that have been happening to them. But perhaps because we're faith-based, they will see trust in us and consistency in us. So kiosks is a new idea. We now have a call center. We've never had that before. We're working with Hayes, which is the Jewish version of us. And we're working with 2 other agencies to create a call center. So parents have a third party, a faith-based third party that they can call in and find out the status of where their child is. And they can ask questions. That is not calling the government and giving their address and email address and phone number, because they're too afraid to do it, but they want their baby. As a mother, I cannot imagine. And I have heard the stories firsthand. It is just, we must do something. So these are some of the solutions we've come up with. We are looking at building a school in Baltimore. We're going to build a little school for vulnerable kids, and we'll see if it works. And then maybe we'll have schools all over the country. But the interesting thing about federal funding and foundation funding is everybody wants to fund something that works, but nobody wants to fund somebody to try something to see if it would work. So that's where we say things like, hello, major donor. We want to start a school. What do you say? And hope that they will give us money to do the innovation to prove to the government, to foundations, to corporations that it's not a bad plan and we've worked out the kinks, because they're not going to let us go national with something that's kind of half cooked. So we want, for those of you who don't use trauma language very often, we do talk about the 3 traumas that children experience. Trauma 1 is the trauma that they experienced in their home country that has led them to move on, or the farewell from their family. Trauma 2 is the actual experience of the journey, whatever that has taken, whatever has happened to them on that journey. And then trauma 3 is the experience of emerging into a new world where things are so unstable. So there, we talk about the trauma triad for children, particularly. All migrants experience the trauma triad on some level, but because children are in such a formative developmental stage, it's really important that they experience as much safety, consistency, ritual, and healthy pattern as soon as possible. So one of the things that we're doing for children who have been under extreme trauma, for children with disabilities, for children with mental health issues, we are looking at starting a small school. We've started hiring teachers and assistants and stuff. We're kind of excited. In Baltimore, because that's where our headquarters is. And it's also a massive migration port where people are moved throughout the country. To intentionally provide mental health care, to intentionally seek to address the trauma, all 3 traumas, and to provide that kind of consistency for children who are already vulnerable, for children, for example, who have experienced sex trafficking and who are under the age of 12. We want to make sure that they have the kind of intentional mental health care and trauma care that is needed for them to start to heal. And being moved around and shifted around and going into mainstreamed into a school is not necessarily in their best interest. So we are innovating by trying it. 2 more innovations. The next innovation is actually children's mental health. For those of you who don't know, if a child acts up in one of these centers or in a home that is run by Refugee resettlement, they have a 1-strike policy. So if you are found acting up, now mind you, what these kids have gone through, that they're separated from their parents. My child acts up because her Barbie dream house wasn't put together fast enough. These kids have experienced intense issues of separation anxiety and violence, and often basic abuse and danger and conflict. And we expect them to be perfectly behaved. But if they experience an outburst, they get placed into a different category. And it only takes 1 outburst. I have more than 1 outburst daily. It takes 1 outburst, and they are placed into a category where they are considered part of at risk, and they are separated from the rest of their community. They are punished for dealing with their emotions in the system that we currently have. LIRS petitioned, we innovated while the pandemic was happening, and we've petitioned and received a small amount of federal funding where we're going to be able to provide, first on a small scale, hopefully on a large scale, mental health care for kids who are having those kinds of outbursts instead of separation from the community that they know. So we are hoping to provide mental health caseworkers, mental health care across the board for unaccompanied minors at some point in the near future. It is something that has not been provided systemically, and these children are now growing into adults who are still experiencing wounds. So what can we do to help them heal? Last but not least, you may see LIRS and a couple other agencies pop up welcome centers. LIRS traditionally works with refugees and children, and that's it. That's what our expertise is in, and that's what we're sticking to. Well, as I explained to you when I started, organizations must evolve. We have to evolve to where the need is instead of what we are good at. We've got to become what people need us to be. So one of the concerns has been that there need to be safe havens in a variety of cities. I think we're talking about starting with 5. And I couldn't name for you what they are because no one's told me yet. They're still exploring proposals of where and what we already have. welcome centers. And that would not just be for refugees or children, that would be for asylum seekers as well. So that's for people who need employment services, people who need healthcare, people need help guidance, English as a second language, really a safe place for families, a safe place for migrants. And right now we have an administration that is friendly to this idea. We have a number of governors who have said not in our state, sadly. But we have a number of governors who have said, you want to come in and help? We like help. But it's going to require, you know, as I laid out, that new rebirth of trust, incrementally proving that you can come to the Welcome Center and ICE will not be in the parking lot. We have to prove that. That's not a given anymore. So as we're starting to build, we have to incrementally rebuild the relationships with leaders in the community. We have to make sure that we are consistent in how we build those relationships and how we do case management and how we work with children and how we do reunification. Everything must show that we are not going to betray their trust. So that's kind of the overview: children and family, innovation, what we do, how we do it, and a little bit about what I think we will see in the future. Some of the statistics that people find shocking: 85% of the children that come across the border have a family member. 65% of the kids who come across the border, what we call the kiddos, the young people who come across the border, have a parent. So this isn't children just running wild with nowhere to connect to. This is a reunification of families. And we feel the same way about our work with refugees. We have families that have been separated for years now that we are bringing back together. And we do it at airports, and we do it in apartments, and we do it. But this is about making sure that the core unit of what we believe society is based, that family love is as close as we can create for these children and for their families. So I'm open to questions. I love questions. I am also going to leave you my email address and the videos so that it can be passed around to everyone. So you can get in contact with me as well in the future. Our organization does a Hope for the Holidays program that people write cards to people in detention, and we collect money for all of these kids in temporary foster care and in transitional foster care to have Christmas presents. It's one of the things we do. And people love to have card parties using the cards that they never sent out, that they thought they were going to send out. So people have boxes and boxes of leftover cards. We will take them, fill them out, send a positive message of love, and we will collect them. We do a program called Gather, which is an family educational program. It just launched, and the country is the Democratic Republic of Congo. Last year's theme was Afghanistan. And it does music and recipes and coloring pages and prayers that specifically target what's going on and explain what's going on, education, and legislative advocacy. Right now we are up to here in regards to the support of the Afghan allies and extracting them and bringing them safely to a country where they will not be slaughtered. These are people who are interpreters and support staff for our military. And so any of those things, and seemingly I write topics on climate displacement. Who knew? So I am more than happy to continue the dialogue with all of you, with any of you. And I'm grateful, you know, when I left the Catholic world for the Lutheran world, I didn't feel like I was really leaving. I just kind of connected things. So it is wonderful to reconnect with where I call home, even if I am visiting somewhere else. I am a migrant in the Lutheran world. So thank you all for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have a question? They want to jump in there? Just unmute yourself. And we have actually been involved in the card holiday, Hope for Holidays in the past. I see Alicia. Alicia's gonna unmute herself. Unmute yourself. Can I unmute her?
Alicia, you're still muted.
I'm sorry.
There you are.
One of the reasons immigrants on the border are not being permitted in, and maybe you touched on this, I was a little distracted, I'm sorry, because I didn't have a video on, but is that because of the COVID, they are not letting immigrants in. In fact, they're just turning them away. I think we ought to make a push for all of the vaccines that we have to vaccinate immigrants as they come in so that they're not a danger. And if we send them back, we ought to again offer the vaccine and give it to them if they want it. To me, just a lame excuse that this health issue is, and it's one of Trump's excuses for not permitting immigrants to come in. So I think that is one little area that we need to work in. And I do want to thank you very much for all the work you're doing for the children. You know, we were trying to do some of that work as the immigrants were coming through on buses. And we have not gotten organized this year. The person who was in charge couldn't do it. And so unfortunately, we've not been meeting buses of immigrants, but hopefully that will resume. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. They were mostly comments, not questions, unless you have an answer to the COVID restrictions.
Sure. I don't have an answer. I can respond, but I don't want to set your hopes too high. I think what you're referring to is Title 42. And Title 42 was a Trump policy that called for expulsion of migrants based on coronavirus, based on like the Surgeon General's determination that it was dangerous for people to come into the country because of coronavirus. And that it allowed for rapid expulsion of unauthorized border crossers and asylum seekers because of corona. And it's an expulsion instead of a deportation. So that means migrants aren't afforded the right to make a case to stay in the US in front of an immigration judge because they're being expelled under Title 42 because of the Center for Disease Control. So expulsion is very different. And it strips away the rights that all migrants have in the United States. You know, that so as we're talking about, we have repeatedly contacted Congress to call for an end to Title 42. But the problem is it's an administrative decision. The administration put this into place and the Biden administration has not repealed it.
Right.
And so exactly. So what has ended up happening is the excuse of COVID to do this horrific behavior and to sidestep our laws has placed us in this no-win. I think the Biden administration right now, and I am not besties with them. I've sat on a couple conference calls and been very proud of myself that I didn't say something stupid, but I would not consider myself like bonded with the administration. But my experience and the experience of our advocacy team is that immigration the immigration system and what's going on in regards to immigration is so horrifically fractured and broken
Yes,
that it requires a complete overhaul
right.
of the
right,
entire
right.
immigration system. And they don't have the bandwidth to do it right now. And so what they have done is they have paused, and that pause is killing people. We all know that as people are coming into the country and they're getting tested as positive far less than the state of Florida. Let's expel Florida. No offense to anyone here who lives in Florida, but come on. We are currently expelling people who have a legal right to come into our country and to seek asylum and to have a day in court. And so when Title 42 is repealed, and there was talk about Title 42 being repealed in June. Well, it's August. I haven't seen it. So I think the fear is that the immigration system that is already, a creaky bridge is just going to crumble if Title 42 gets repealed. And the problem is it's already crumbling. It's crumbling without Title 42 being repealed. Title 42 is just, the truth is, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's so dangerous. And the problem is, it is really family separation under a different name.
Right.
It is an excuse to throw people out of the country with absolutely no due process under the auspices of disease. And if we haven't learned something from scapegoating in history, where we have seen over and over again, well, the Jews in Germany are bringing disease into our country.
No.
How many times do we have to hear in history and over and over and over again, scapegoated communities who are being called disease bringers and violence bringers? If people have their day in court, if they have due process, they share their story, we know why they're here. If they don't, they're just expelled. So I 100% agree with you, Alicia. We need to stop Title 42 as soon as possible.
It's just
Absolutely.
It's a lame excuse. And
Absolutely.
I'm going to keep calling the White House, because Biden can do something about it. He's the one who is continuing Trump's policy. And I think we all need to just keep calling the White House and tell them that it is a lot of, I don't want to say BS necessarily, but that's what it is.
It is. It absolutely is. And I like your language about it. Amen. I think the other piece that's important to know is, and I didn't know this before I started working in this field because I was doing global migration with the Vatican. So when I got into US immigration policy and law and what's going on, I have been flabbergasted at the disaster that I see before me. I'm flabbergasted at how poor the information is that comes out and how little people know. The other thing I did not realize, except I got hired by an immigration organization during the Trump administration, where our organization was forced to sue the president. We sued the president because, and we won, chaos. But remember when the governors were going to be allowed to decide if they wanted to resettle people? And we were like, no, that's constitutional. You don't get a choice on that one.
Right.
LIRS and HIAS were the two organizations that went and sued the president and got that to stop. The president and the administrative wing control migration far more than they control almost anything else in government.
Right.
It's unfathomable to me that there is not a better system for us figuring out refugee caps and whether Title 42 should be repealed. Why isn't this in the hands of the people? It's in the hands, a lot of these things are in the hands of the administration. And while I don't know what is going on in the Biden White House, one of the reasons that administration brought hope to immigration agencies is not just because they want to build the infrastructure and actually have migrants. It's because they said they would repeal Title 42. They told us they would raise the presidential determination and go from 15,000 to 125,000.
Right.
They made promises that they were going to make these changes, and those promises have not come to pass.
Right.
And so there is a frustration, and we were told the Afghan allies is a perfect example. And then I should probably get off because I'm taking up all of your day. But the Afghan allies is a perfect example. We, as a government, made a promise that we were going to take care of these people who volunteered with us for 12 to 14 months, who gave their time and energy to be translators and take care of our military. Our government made that promise. Our military made that promise. We then pulled our troops out of Afghanistan after a 20-year war and didn't provide for any plan for how to get these people out. And now they're being beheaded and their families are being killed in front of them. I want to know where the character and integrity of that is. That completely lacks character. We should be getting the journalists that stood up to the Taliban that will be killed. We should be getting the women's rights activists. We've got to get them out of there. And our government just went, yeah, we should make a plan. What? What? So LIRS, who is 80%, 85, 90%, depends on the year, reliant on federal funding, just went absolutely after the Biden-Harris administration. And we were told by every other refugee resettlement agency, there are 9 of us, all 8 of the other ones said, don't do it. You don't want to leave bad taste in their mouths, and they're about to hand out a lot of money, and you don't want to be excluded from that money because you said, you went on CNN and said, no, this is unacceptable. So just lay low. Let the veterans organizations do it. Go ahead. Shh, come on. The money's coming in a couple of months. Fiscal flips in September and October. So if you just lay low until September, October, when you get your money, you get your treats and your Christmas presents from the Biden-Harris administration, then you can go all proactive. But don't do it right now because they're going to get mad at you and you're not going to get your money. And our organization said, morally, we cannot. We are a faith-based organization. Morally, we can't. And we staged a protest. We called it a rally. Staged a protest outside the White House and got CNN there and got all these NPR's been doing articles on us standing up. We're going to get in trouble. It's what we do. But I would rather be with the agency that's standing up and being moral than be with an agency that's saying it's okay to sacrifice human lives and vulnerable people. Of the 400 people that we have gotten out of Afghanistan, and that's in the last 2 weeks, which, by the way, now everybody's on the let's get the Afghan allies like train because it's like a big thing in the media. So they want to be on it. And all of a sudden there's potentially 20,000 refugees showing up and everybody wants to resettle them because they'd get money. Well, we were there fighting for their lives. And of the 400 people that have come in, a third of them are children under the age of 8. Babies in arms. People giving up their seats so mothers and children can be the first out. That's terrifying to me. That we are still fighting an administration that said they would support us, an administration that said they would be people of character and integrity, and they would repeal these horrible policies that were put in place. We're still fighting. The fight isn't over. And we, in our free time, need to rebuild the immigration system and build a bridge that isn't crumbling. So that isn't from 1952 and isn't crumbling and isn't just not serving the people. So I ask for your prayers. I ask for your support. And most of all, I ask that we continue this journey together. So thank you for your question. And I'm sorry I got all hot and bothered and fired up, but I do that and because I care. So
Chris,
thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to jump in here because we're about 10 minutes beyond the time that we really try hard to have these sessions last. But my goodness, don't we appreciate your passion and your knowledge and your work and your appeal to us and everyone else you speak with. you have our support and our love and our thanks and our solidarity and our gratitude for being with us this morning. Thank you so much. And Chris, I will tell you that we normally let Loretto, after these immigration spotlights, we normally are back in touch with our speakers and their organizations, and we make a small monetary contribution to your work in gratitude. And so we'll be getting back in touch with you. I'm sure Rox will do that. So again, thank you again. This was just one of our most wonderful sessions.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Your welcome is appreciated.
Okay. Okay. Rox, I think you can stop the recording now. I don't think I can.